Lord, I love you. Thank you for this really awesome opportunity to share some truths of the way you've made our minds and truths of the moral law and what you command us to do. And I pray that you would just speak through me and make my words clear. I pray your Holy Spirit would teach us and introduce us all to how to honor you with our minds and how to live out just what it means to love you. So I do ask for your help. I need your help. I pray you'd be here with us. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen. Okay. Yeah, that is rolling and those numbers are turning. I like to double check. I may have professionally forgotten to record my clients before when I am rolling, so I'm pretty paranoid. But anyways, the purpose of this is threefold. It's going to be divided into two main subjects, okay? But the three main points that is my purpose of this class is to help you become aware of the workings of your own mind. 2, help you become more practiced in recognizing your intentions. And 3, help you better know that which God commands us and why he does so. Like, Kyle was just saying, the why always matters more than the how, right? The why matters more than the what. And that's what we're going to land on here towards the end. So, I usually use screens, but I wanted to push myself today when I do the dry erase board. So, this is going to be part 1, nature. Can y'all in the back read this? Nature of man. I don't know if you can read that or not. So, man is a moral agent, is he not?
Yes.
What does moral mean?
Knowing evil from good.
Okay, moral has to do with knowing good and evil, right? Any input? What's a moral agent?
I didn't raise my hand.
What? Okay, so let's start over here. We'll probably pick the lightest color. Moral agent has certain parts of the mind, or else you're not a moral agent. So a moral agency. Moral agent will have certain workings of the mind. So this is really kind of a discussion of what the soul is comprised of. So the mind, before we discuss any of the 3 main attributes of moral agency, you have what's called a self-consciousness. Do you know what self-consciousness is? You know you have one because you observe that you have one. Is there anybody in this room who doesn't know that they're in the room? Right? You know you're here because you're aware that you're here, right? There are philosophies today that say we can't really know if we exist, but to say you don't exist is in fact to affirm that you exist. It really is that self-refuting. So this is what we call a first truth of reason. Finney called it an a priori, that's the Latin term, or a first truth. You have to assume it to believe anything at all. So you have a self-consciousness. I guess I'll write that here. Self-consciousness. Self-consciousness is the mind's recognition of itself. It's the faculty of mind, that's just the working part of your mind, that is self-aware of the workings of the mind. It's like the security camera in the corner of the convenience store, and it just has that wide-angle view, and it just is on record all the time. And just sees everything that goes on. And you're aware that this is happening right now. There are certain things that can affect your self-consciousness. You could take drugs. You could be asleep. You could be injured. Those things can alter your self-consciousness. But otherwise, in a functioning mind, you have a self-consciousness. So it's also the state of self-awareness that recognizes your own ability or lack of ability involved in the workings of your mind. So the real 3 workings of the mind that we're going to pay most attention to is, we all know this one from a very early age, sensibilities. Is my handwriting good enough? Okay. It's it. T-I-E-S. There you go. Is that right?
Maybe you should write.
Do you want to come write for me?
I'm good.
He's here to keep me on track. Okay, so sensibilities. The sensibilities are your susceptibility of feeling. When the air was cold in here, you could feel it. and it told your mind, it's cold in here, right? You were self-conscious or aware that it was cold. The Bible describes the workings of the soul as having sensibilities. Psalm 42, 1 and 2 says, as the deer pants for the water, so my soul pants for you, O God. My soul thirsts for God, for the living God. The word soul there is nephesh in the Hebrew. And I'm going to point out where it's used in these verses. So you can see the nephesh, or the soul. It's the living soul. Human beings and I believe animals are also described as having a nephesh in the Old Testament. Bugs are not. Plants are not. Those types of living things aren't. But the living, breathing, blood-flowing animals have that. So one of the workings is your ability to feel or sense. The next one is the intellect. I'm really sorry about my handwriting. I should have practiced whiteboard writing before.
So with the sensibilities, would you extend that? I just was thinking back to in school we learned our 5 senses. Or I never thought of the spiritual sense.
It would include all 5 of your senses, and in a second we're gonna go through a further description of each of these. But yeah, it would include your 5 senses. Your ability to perceive, your ability to...
Spiritual sense.
Yeah, but there is a spiritual sense too. Your intellect is the faculty of knowing, okay? The Bible says, Proverbs 23:7, for as he thinketh in his heart, or as he thinketh in his nephesh, so is a man. Okay, so there's a thinking, a processing, the data. That activity goes on in the mind, in the intellect. And the one that you keep hearing all about at this conference is what? The will.
Oh, that.
Oh, now why didn't I put free in front of it? Free will. It's actually redundant to call it free will. We say that. We say free will, our will is free. But to have a will, by definition, it's free. Otherwise it's not really a will, is it? Yeah. So anyways, that's the will. And the will is the executive faculty of your mind. It's the part that says, do it, act, choose. And this is all throughout the Bible, but a good example is 1 Chronicles 21, verse 9. As for you, my son Solomon, know the God of your father, and serve him with a whole heart and a willing nephesh. For the Lord searches all hearts and understands every intent of the thoughts. So serve God with a whole heart and a willing mind is to act upon a thing, and that is the activity of the will. So these are the 3 basic... We're going to just assume the self-consciousness. You can't really do much about it. It's just, if the camera's running, camera's running. But these 3 are the main faculties or main faculties of your mind. So let's talk about the sensibilities real quick. So the sensibilities, your feeling, they're not directly chosen. I mean, we sense, I can feel that this is hard, this is soft. But what about your emotions? That's part of your sensibilities. It's the ability to perceive something or sense something in your soul and your mind. Can you choose your feelings directly?
No.
Feel sad, go do it right now. Okay, feel happy, come on, get happy. That's a real problem, right? People trying to feel happy, and that's a real problem to feel happy. But what if I said, think about your worst life experience. Really dwell on it. I mean, your emotions will follow, but they're not directly chosen. So sensibilities, your feelings, can be indirectly chosen. Do you understand? Is everybody tracking so far? Your sensibilities can be indirectly affected in response to really 3 things. So the thoughts of your intellect. You could learn something about a person you didn't know before. It can really affect you, right? Oh, I didn't know that person I thought so highly of does this or says this or said that about me. I've got this new information. I feel really bad now. But I didn't choose that. It's indirectly caused by something in my intellect. It can also be certainly indirectly caused by the activity of your will. When you sin, you feel bad for a reason, right? Some people want to sin and not feel bad about it. But I believe that that's just by nature what happens when you sin. You're not supposed to feel good about it. That's why when you lie, the lie detector test goes crazy because your body naturally kind of freaks out. It's not made to live contrary to the truth. So indirectly, your will can also affect your sensibilities. Your physical environment, what you ate for lunch just now can really affect your sensibilities. In 6th grade, my middle school was going through a big renovation. And it was already kind of what we considered the hood in Plano. And
What's the hood?
it's the less fortunate part of town. But it was known for having a lot of fights. I'm this quiet, nerdy kid. Can you imagine? I was a nerdy kid. And anyways, they had all the windows boarded up everywhere. There was no sunlight coming into our school in my 6th grade year. And there were fights every single day in that hallway. And I remember just hearing the teachers say, oh, this place is like a dungeon. This place is miserable. The kids feel terrible. No wonder. Our physical environment was producing something emotionally in our minds, and that would result in our behavior. But did our environment cause the fights? No, it influenced, right? Your thoughts, your physical environment, you could have a cheery decor at home, nice flowers or whatever color suits you, and it makes you feel good when you walk into a room. Those types of things indirectly affect your feelings or sensibilities. Your intellect, let's move on to the next one. This contains your knowledge. That's all the data that you hold. You're good at holding data, Tor. You're like seriously, if I have a question about math or science, my wife and I are just like, go ask Tor. Yeah. I don't know how, man. He's a little data processing center, but...
Little?
Well, it'd be better than if I said you were like extremely huge or something.
Yeah, I was going to say, actually, it's okay, Tor.
Anyways, so this contains your knowledge and facts it's the relation of facts to your mind. It also, the intellect contains your conscience. We know what a conscience is, right? Conscience is that internal judge of right and wrong, and it's independent of your will. If you feel guilty for something, can you will yourself out of feeling guilty? You can't turn your conscience off directly, can you?
A lot of people wish they could.
A lot of people wish they could, so what do they do instead?
Yeah, they
Lie to themselves.
They what?
They lie to themselves.
They lie to themselves. Right. They have to change the workings of the mind through the activity of the will to believe something that's not true to try and soothe the conscience or excuse it. They have to believe an idea strong enough because the conscience makes reference to what you believe. It makes reference to what is in your intellect. And if you can believe a thing strong enough, you can kind of silence that conscience. And that'll take place. And you actually end up being self-deceived is what happens when you silence your conscience or sear it. The intellect also contains your reason. Now, the reason is the ability to compare two facts. I know this and I know this. I compare them to each other and out comes a new fact. Now that new fact, and this is not as important, but the new fact is actually part of your imagination. If you want to think about that, that's where ideas, new ideas come from. But it's through the workings of our reason where that takes place. And this is all happening here in your intellect. Memory is also in your intellect. That's your ability to store and recall information. Very important. Thoughts can be brought to your mind in multiple ways. So involuntarily, thoughts come to your mind all day long, don't they? If you turn on the TV, it's a good reason we don't watch TV in my house. If you're driving down the street or if you drive through Dallas and the billboards, oh my gosh. Thankfully they're not too bad around here, but even the innocuous stuff, go to this dentist, buy this product, have whiter teeth, shop here, be skinny, be muscly. It's like thoughts. You don't really choose those, do you? So that's one way that information can enter your mind, involuntarily. Have you ever smelled a smell and you are transported back to when you were 3 years old? Mm-hmm. Isn't that crazy? I think when we get to heaven, we're going to find out smell is actually one of the most important senses because it triggers memories like almost nothing else does. It's amazing. So there's ways that you are involuntarily, or your thoughts and intellect are involuntarily affected. But you can also voluntarily recall things from your memory. You can use your intellect in a voluntary way. Before you act on anything, you have to recall voluntarily certain information to act upon. To come in this room, you had to think, well, that title is really weird and cool, and I don't know why you chose to come in here. We're going to talk about why you chose to come in here in a minute, but you had to process something and reference some information. So the data in your intellect can also be voluntarily chosen. So it is involuntarily occurs, and it also voluntarily occurs. So let's talk about the will, because that's what we're all here for. So the will is the executive faculty of the mind that is self-determining, creatively free, and it's always choosing. And maybe not when you're sleeping. I actually haven't really researched that, what they think about, or what anybody thinks about sleeping. Some dreams I can totally choose what I'm doing. Most of the time I can't. It's like I'm watching a movie. But when you're awake and your self-consciousness is operating, that's what we're talking about, you're always choosing. Are you not? You know, you chose to come in here. You're still choosing to stay in here, though. Yeah. You could walk out if you wanted, but there's certain motivations or reasons you're here. So the activity of the will is by nature directly chosen. The activity of the will is not involuntary, ever. That violates the nature of your will. It's another word we call for it, volitional. Now, it can be influenced by external stimuli, but the originating point of decision is there in your will, in your mind. There's a lot of influences to choose a certain way, right? But when it comes down to it, the choice is yours. So I thought about bringing some really silly pictures or something in here, but I'm not going to do that. So I'm just going to say the word Hillary Clinton. You made a face. Donald Trump. You giggled, right? I mean, those are very polarizing figures. Like immediately, you're making a face too. Like, isn't this funny? I totally influenced all of you just by saying some really polarizing names. Isn't that interesting? So I put an image in your mind, and you had a feeling about it, right? Does anybody care to share? When I said Hillary Clinton, how did you feel? Did it affect anyone's sensibility? What was the vibe you got when I said that? Did anybody get a vibe?
I think brashness or just...
Brashness. Did it just kind of get under anybody's skin? Yeah. If you're not, I'm just, this is East Texas. It's pretty conservative out here. It's a pretty safe crowd. How about Donald Trump? How was anybody affected by that?
Off the wall.
Off the wall. But you got an impression in your senses, didn't you? Isn't that interesting? And you didn't choose it, did you? Now, what if I told you that it is a transgression of the moral law to think about Hillary Clinton? Or it is a sin. Oh, you just thought about it again. Or it's a transgression of law to think about Donald Trump. Can you think about something else intentionally? Go on and do it. Focus on something. Think about a red balloon or something. You can do it, right? Yeah, it takes a little bit of effort, but you're able to do it. You're able to volitionally choose what your intellect is dwelling upon. You see? It really is that simple, and we do it all day long. But our self-consciousness is just numb to it. We just go on autopilot all day long. If you get in a car these days, and I guess I'm too old. I'm afraid of my kids who are going to get these self-driving cars. But I don't ever want to drive a self-driving car. I hope I don't have to. I swore I'd never have an iPhone, and I've got an iPhone, and how can I live without an iPhone? I hope it's not the mark of the beast. But anyways, this is not an eschatological talk. I'm just being funny, son. This is being funny.
I don't understand your humor.
That's all right. So a self-driving car, Ave really just cars these days. You don't have to learn an awful lot in driver's ed to drive a car. You don't have to know what's under the hood. You don't have to know how to change the oil. Really just put the gas in it, and you don't even have to know how to do that. You just have to know how to safely drive it within the confines of certain laws to not kill anybody else or yourself. And that's basically how we drive our bodies. You just know enough, and there's nothing wrong with that. There's a lot going on under the hood. And we don't necessarily have to know how all that works for it to function that way. So our minds are always doing all this stuff all the time. And part of the purpose of this class, like I said, is to help you just become aware of what's going on underneath the hood, so to speak. I think it's fascinating. And it's helped me get control of my own thoughts, my own emotions, and be able to choose in spite of them. So that's why we're doing some little silly exercises like that. So, continuing. So let me ask you, which of these three faculties of the mind do we assign a moral quality?
The will.
Why the will?
Because it should determines whether you're choosing right or wrong.
It has to do with choice, right? We recognize, unless we fill our heads with a lot of theological, philosophical hoo-ha. Does anybody say hoo-ha? That's a cool word, right? Unless we fill ourselves with anything beyond common sense. Common sense says, if you can choose it, it is praiseworthy or blameworthy. If I can't choose it, I can't be at fault, nor should I be praised for it. We praise people for being tall and good looking and whatnot. But is that actually a good reason to be praised? No. It's only an insult, really, if you insult something that a person could choose to do that has to do with their lifestyle of choice, than if you insult something that's they couldn't do anything about. If you
Like, you're ugly.
well, yeah, if you said it's rude, but if you said something about my wife and you were to say, oh yeah, your wife's okay, Joel, but she's not very tall. Well, your wife's all right, but she's not that strong. I say, well, who cares? I don't care. But if you said, your wife, she's unfaithful to you. She's that kind of woman. I'd be like, ooh, hey now. That's serious, because that's calling into question the moral quality of a person. So we recognize that the will and things having to do with choice is where the moral quality is found. So, the will is the volitional part of the mind. I wish I had something really good. Do you have a book handy? No book. I'm just going to pick up this marker, okay? This marker will work. So, I could pick up this marker. I chose to pick it up, right? But why did I pick it up? What if I picked it up to just throw it right at you because I don't like the way you're looking at me? But I could also pick it up because I'm going to teach an important spiritual point next that's going to bless all of you. You see? My will contains both of those things. It contains the volition, but it contains what? What's behind the volition that matters? The motive. Intention is the word I use. It's the intention. It's the intention of it. So you can do all the right things with the wrong intention, can't you? And maybe nobody knows that except you and God. So
Did you choose to drop it?
I didn't choose to drop it. That was involuntary. So every outward volition or chosen action has an inward intention. And intention in the will is actually where the moral character resides, or that's where that quality would be belong to. Are y'all following this? Can you see why your senses and feelings are not moral in their quality? You ever feel really bad about something and you feel like you're far from God because you feel bad? I have. Have you ever been tempted and you're really tempted by a thing, but maybe you don't give in to it, but you feel so nasty? Why did I have this terrible thought enter my mind? I feel so yucky now. Surely God's mad at me. But I didn't sin and I didn't give in to it. You've got to recognize if you haven't chosen to feel that way and you are choosing to move beyond that, God looks at your will. He looks at your intention, why you're doing what you're doing. That's how it's helped me. So Finney gives a really neat analogy. He talks about two seminary students. Seminary student number 1, he goes to seminary so that he can get a job in the church, so that he can talk to people about God, so that he can reach the lost and glorify God. Seminary student number 2 goes to seminary so he can get a degree, so he can get a job in a church to secure an income and be happy.
And be well respected.
And be well respected. That's another reason. Is that actually in there? Yeah. So, okay, that's great. I'm glad you added that. So they both in form do exactly the same thing. And by outward appearances, nobody would know the difference. But the intention, I'm going to write the word intention here. The intention is clearly different. Now, can you know somebody's intention?
Not directly.
Not directly.
No.
Yeah, not unless they tell you. But they could be lying.
But they could be lying. That's right. Yeah. You got to remember this. Yeah. That's a big thing. Genesis 6:5 Then the Lord saw that the wickedness of man was great on the earth, and that every intent of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. The intents of the thoughts of the heart. Hebrews 4:12, for the word of God is living and active and sharper than any two-edged sword, and piercing as far as the division of soul and spirit, of both joints and marrow, able to judge the thoughts and intentions of the heart. So when we talk about what God commands us to choose, it is to be understood more clearly that the subject is about what God commands us to intend. I want to make that really clear. That's where the moral quality of your choices exists. This is where you fulfill the moral law. Can you intend something that cannot be carried out? I'm going to get a drink. Pardon me. I have to fall off.
Sure can.
You have 3 minutes and 30 seconds.
How much?
3 minutes and 30 seconds.
I've gone almost 30 minutes already?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Amazing. So this should be like a 2-hour talk. You say, yes, you can intend a thing that you cannot carry out. Does anybody disagree? Do you agree with that, or you do not agree with that? Right.
Let's see if I can.
You might have the intention to rob a bank, if you could get away with it. I was a good kid in school, by all appearances, but I knew my heart. I'd look at kids that would get in trouble and think, why are you so bad? Why are you talking back to the teacher like that? What's wrong with you? I knew I would suffer the least amount of adversity if I just kept quiet. You see? That's how I get what I want. I'd be a good kid. And I was polite, but really looking at my life until I became a Christian when I was 18, it was all for self-preservation. If I didn't think I could safely get away with that, then I wouldn't do it. I was a pretty clean kid, but those were my motivations. Those were my ultimate intention behind why I did what I did. Matthew 5:27 through 28. You've heard that it was said, you shall not commit adultery. But I say to you that everyone who looks at a woman with lust for her has already committed adultery with her in his heart. That's an example of that. So we're going to move on to part 2, quickly. And I cannot guarantee that you're going to grasp part 2. But this is nothing more than a quick introduction to these ideas. And I can recommend some resources if you want to do further study. So this is basically how the mind operates. These are the 3 basic functions for a moral being. If you don't have one of these, if you don't have a will, then you're a cow or a dog. Animals have instinct, and so do people, but that's not the same thing as will. If you don't have sensibilities, you got an intellect and a will, I don't know what you are then, a cyborg or something? I don't know. And if you don't have an intellect, but you have sensibilities and a will, you're an infant. Because they've really got this going on, and they're learning to make this happen, and they've got none of this. Right? Did you have a functioning intellect at what?
No, that's not what I
9
mean.
months?
Can you have a will without an intellect? Because
Well, I'm
to do
saying-
something, you have to use your intellect to think about.
But that's why you watch a baby and they just flail around and hit themselves in the face, and they put weird things in their mouths, and they have no data, but they know, man, something goes in this mouth. But that's instinct driven.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that's a good question for later.
But I wouldn't say
Yeah.
that's a choice.
People that are.
I think babies largely operate under instinct. That's how a baby knows how to nurse.
Yeah, exactly.
No one teaches it how to nurse.
Yeah, but is
You
that
know.
a choice?
I don't think it is a moral choice in any sense of what we're talking about.
Because you wouldn't blame a baby for finding a knife and accidentally hitting somebody.
I wouldn't blame a baby. Go ahead.
Mentally impaired or another example.
Thank you. A mentally impaired person is another example. That's right. And I would say somebody in that state of mind would not qualify as a moral being. It would not be morally accountable.
Correct.
Yes.
They're
In
judged by a
principle.
different Standard.
I would think so in principle. So, part 2. What are we to intend and why? Have about 10 minutes left?
Oh, you have 10 seconds left.
Of 30 minutes.
Out of 30.
Then I have another 10 minutes.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, if you'll add like,
Ask that question again.
what are we to intend and why? Okay, so why are you at the conference this weekend? Just blurt out some answers for me.
You're my dad.
Yeah, but I told you didn't have to come, didn't I?
Yeah, but I
But
thought
you chose to come for that.
because I have a will.
Because you have a will,
Expansion of knowledge.
expansion of knowledge. Okay, I'm not writing your things down, but I want to hear them.
Learn to be useful.
So learn to be useful. Okay, keep your responses in mind. I'm going to call this subordinate. Any other reasons you're here?
Expansion of relation.
Well, I wasn't planning on coming. It's my husband, and then yesterday, I had an off-the-rails day, terrible, depressed, upset, couldn't even get out of it to help my oldest daughter.
Yeah.
And I thought, you know what? I don't know if it must be the Lord trying to get me to go, because I need help, I need to go. I need something.
Revival.
Yeah,
I was like-
the devil's plan backfired is what happened.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
was just gonna
That's
go
what it sounds
and
like.
cover up, and then I was like, no, I've got to go help myself. I don't know what's not right.
Okay, so we're going to categorize choices. We make choices of the will, volitions, into 3 categories. So y'all gave me some pretty good reasons why you came. Most of them are what I'd call major or subordinate choices or reasons. How many of you put one foot in front of the other and walked through the door? How many of you came to this breakout because you walked through the door? Because you did. You all did, right? I mean, if we were talking strictly in the executive or routine choices, it's because I put one foot in front of the other. That's why you resulted in being in here, right? You tied your shoes. You turned your feet that direction, right? You brushed your teeth. You ate some food. You take a sip of that drink. You probably don't even think about it, right? Those are your executive or routine choices. They don't really have any moral quality. No, but we do them. We have to do them to do stuff. You tie your shoe or whatever. You get that. What you guys basically told me are what I would think are major or subordinate reasons for coming to this. Your major reasons are built upon all these little things you do, these little executive choices. But the major reasons are things like who you marry, what kind of career you pursue, maybe what school you go to, whether you go to one place or another, what kind of lifestyle you're going to live, what kind of financial means you're going to, the standard you're going to live at. But the supreme or ultimate reason or choice you make is actually what God looks at. So this, as far as the conference goes, this is tie your shoe, walk through the door, drove your car. Major choices are, I came to the thing because I want to learn about God. I want to meet other believers because you perceive that there's good to be had from that. And supreme would be to fulfill the moral law. That I see coming to this conference as a means of loving God supremely and loving my neighbor as myself. You see how it can be that? So these are the 3 types of choices. So which of these is God most concerned with? Supreme.
You just told us.
Yeah.
I did. Oh, I gave it away. I bet y'all would have figured it out though. Does he really care about how you tie your shoes?
Probably not.
Could he care about how you tie your shoes?
Well, if you did it with the
It depends on what?
The intention.
It depends on the intention, right? I mean, I don't know about how I could tie my shoes in a way that would be good or bad.
Together and you couldn't go anywhere.
What if you tie your neighbor's shoes together? Then he would care. Yeah, that would not, then you'd be not loving your neighbor as yourself, likely. So moral character is found in the intention, but it's found in your supreme or ultimate choice in life. So what do we base our choices on? What are we intending to secure? So the mind of a moral being has to develop something else. It's a developed idea. It has to have these faculties, but it has to develop the idea of, I guess let's write it down here. Oughtness. Can you read that? Oughtness. It's also called,
Is that a word?
it is a word. I don't know if we use it anymore. We're being kind of old-timing here. Oughtness, obligation. Has to develop this idea. Otherwise, it doesn't really know what it's accountable to. You understand?
Does values go into that? What do you value?
Yeah, that's absolutely what we're talking about next. So, oughtness or obligation, how much time do I have?
You got 4 minutes and 2
Well, this is impossible.
That is
All right. And then we'll go maybe 5 more minutes after
Shoot
that.
the messenger.
So, no, I won't shoot the messenger. So, this idea that I am obligated to do a thing, where is this developed first? Where is this first developed in life?
Childhood.
Through what?
Yeah, moral laws, moral agencies.
Where is it
On
developed?
the left.
Conscience.
No one's saying it. It's actually developed in your sensibilities.
Oh.
I'll explain
Well,
why.
that makes
I'm
sense.
gonna explain why. So, if you ask a small child, what do you like? What is good? What do they say? Things like,
Candy. Candy.
candy, cake, because cake is good, right? What do you like about cake? I don't know, it's good.
It tastes yummy.
Right, so the idea of good, if I were to say, what is good? Like say it like that. Not what is good to you, that drink or that candy, but what is it? Like what is good as an idea? How would you describe it?
Something that's pleasing.
Something is pleasing,
Positive.
positive,
Right.
right? But you see, you're trying to describe an abstract concept. The mind, when it's born, when the person's born, it's a clean slate. And the concept of good is developed through concrete means or experiential things. And the child learns that first birthday, ooh, cake is good. I've never had cake before, and they, get in all over them if you let them do that. But then when they get old enough to walk around, they realize the stove is hot.
Not bad.
The stove is bad. I don't want to touch that. You see? The baby doesn't know the concept of good. The baby develops the idea of the good. But then the intellect starts to develop. And this is where we screw up as people. This is another lesson in and of itself, but children, all people, this has control of us very early on, the feelings, the sensibilities, before the intellect and the reason develop, okay? So, by the time we have the ability to make choices that affect our neighbor, as a young child, this is our master. And we're not reasoning correctly yet, and we're not straightened out morally yet. And before we know it, someday we realize I'm obligated to love my neighbor as myself because I know what good is and I know what is valuable and that good is valuable. And that means my neighbor's good is valuable too. But this has control. And before you know it, they're violating their moral obligation. And I can't tell you what year that is or age that is. I think it's different for every person. Okay? We're talking about a state or a principle that takes place here. So the mind knows that good is intrinsically valuable. That means it has value in and of itself. Okay? Paper money. How much is a paper dollar worth? $1? Supposedly it's huh?
17 cents.
Well, what's 70 cents? But what's it really worth? Like, it's just paper, right?
It's worth the time and effort that went into chopping down the trees.
Yeah, but it's not.
making the machine
But in and of itself, and I'm trying to give you a concrete example because this is challenging. But gold is probably the best example of something intrinsically valuable. You can cut it down to the smallest atom, and it's still gold. You can flatten it out, it's still gold. You can melt it down, it's still gold. It never loses its qualities. I see the commercials on TV. Gold will not go down in value if the economy crashes, they tell us. But it has always been valuable. It's great. They put it in computers because it conducts electricity so well, and it's shiny and it's pretty on our fingers and our earrings and whatnot. So gold is something that we see as intrinsically valuable. So the mind develops this idea of moral obligation towards our neighbor. I'm going to move fast. I'm going to skip a little bit of this stuff. And if anybody's interested, I can email you my notes. So good is actually what everybody is seeking to secure at any given time. Everybody is always seeking to secure good. The problem is we're seeking to secure good based on our perception of what is valuable. Okay, so who has the ultimate perspective of all that's true about reality?
God.
Yeah, Jesus. That should be that's the Sunday school answer. God. We've got to have God's perspective of what is good and what is valuable. Why does God, actually I don't want to get ahead. So everybody's making decisions based upon their estimation of what is valuable. What have I got? I got 5 minutes. This is my extra 5 minutes? Yeah. Okay, cool. Thank you so much for your help. Or I'd go like 3 hours. So think about a billboard. I saw one in town. He was a guy, it was for a Yamaha motorcycle dealership or something. And there's this good-looking young guy on a motorcycle, throwing his hair back, pretty girl on the seat behind him, throwing her hair back, smiling. financing available. Get your motorcycle or whatever. What are they selling? Practically, what are they selling on that thing?
Fun.
You say happiness, fun. They're selling a motorcycle. But that doesn't interest me. But it might interest somebody. I mean, it certainly interests somebody. They're portraying the idea that there is good to be attained through the means of a motorcycle. You will attain happiness through a relationship with a pretty girl, maybe, if you have a motorcycle. Yeah. But people don't think that way. We don't think, I need to attain happiness. I want to have good because good is valuable. We don't think that. We think that motorcycle would be fun to have. But if you were to see where the strings are attached all the way back to their heart, only you can know this. You know where the strings are attached and where they go to. If it's going to ultimately attain good for yourself, or ultimately attain good as God says to attain good, and seek that which is valuable that God says. Our perceived value can change based on your understanding. How much do you pay for a bottle of water at Walmart? You're willing to pay like $1, right? What if you had to walk 10 miles across the desert and you're at the last stop and you had no water? How much would you pay for a bottle of water then?
A lot.
Probably just highway robbery. You'd pay whatever, right? It's the same thing, but the perception of value changes based on your circumstances. But God's perception of value never changes. So how do we estimate what is good? And I'm going to really quickly say good is blessedness, well-being, happiness. It's not strictly a state of the sensibilities. It's what Winky was talking about as joy. It's peace of mind, peace of conscience. It's when the conscience and the will are no longer at war. Okay? That is the kind of good that God brings us. But how do we estimate the value of good?
By listening to God.
Listening to God, that's the means of doing that. I think I can finish real quick. I'm going to say this. God has the truest perception of all knowable reality. Therefore, we are obligated to conform our thinking and perception of the valuable with his perception of the valuable. Jesus told a story about the man whose hand was withered, and he was going to heal him on the Sabbath. And Jesus said to the people who said, they're watching to see if you heal on the Sabbath. And he said to them, what man among you is there who has a sheep, and if it falls into a pit on the Sabbath, will he not take hold of it and lift it out? How much more valuable then is a man than a sheep? So then it is lawful to do good on the Sabbath. What's more valuable, the well-being of a rock or a butterfly?
Butterfly.
What's more valuable, the well-being of a butterfly or a sheep?
Sheep.
How about a sheep or a man?
Man.
How about a man or God?
God.
How about 8 billion men or God?
God.
Why? Why is God's well-being and state of happiness more important than 8 billion
He's
people?
the source and maintenance of all of us.
The difference in the value, not the value of the thing itself, but the value of the well-being of those things I just listed, is their capability of experiencing the good. A rock can't experience any good. A butterfly, who knows? A sheep can experience some good. Animals can suffer. Man can suffer and experience good. If you read the Bible, God can suffer and experience good. It's in the capability of the agent to experience good that gives it the value. And that's actually why we're obligated to obey God. Do you see that? We're flying through this. This is something I've tried to understand for years. So I'll definitely share my notes with you, and I've skipped a lot of stuff. But I want you to understand that. God doesn't tell us, love me supremely because he created us. Though he did create us, but I don't think that gives him the right to rule our lives any more than a drug-addicted parent has the right to rule their child's life.
Or for example, the Greek mythological gods.
Oh, they're terrible.
They're horrible.
They don't deserve, the Greek gods don't deserve our love and affection.
Yeah.
God knows in his infinite perspective that, thank you, God knows in his infinite perspective that his capability and ability to experience goodness, blessedness, happiness is of infinitely greater value. Therefore, he says, love me with all your heart. He doesn't say, love me with all your heart because I came up with these arbitrary rules. It's because obeying God's law is the greatest means to securing the highest good in the universe. Do you see that? And like that, you're to love your neighbor as yourself. So God is pursuing, through his love and his infinite intelligence, to promote the highest good in the universe. And that is what he is asking us to pursue as well. And that's why God tells us to value him supremely. It's not arbitrary. Dr. Frankenstein created a monster, right?
Yeah.
That didn't give him the right to do that. You know, it didn't give him the right to rule that monster's life or create a monstrosity. Just because you create a thing doesn't necessarily give you the right to be the ruler of that thing. But our obligation to love and serve God is due to the value of the good that God experiences. And we choose it through our ultimate intention. And anything less than that is not a fulfillment of the moral law. So when Jesus says, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, understand you're to choose or intend with your deepest motivation that, to seek God. Or I shouldn't even say that. To seek God is the means to promote his highest good. And if that sounds really theological, you're at a theology conference. But in principle, breaking it down this way, I want that to help you out. So, do you guys notice the graphic on the screen that was in the auditorium? Do you recall what's in the background behind the words? I did the media for it. It's kind of...
Two highways.
It's two highways, yeah. And what's...
My way or the highway fit?
Well, one's the brake lights, and one's the headlights, right? That actually has meaning. You're either going one way or you're going the other. There's not a mixed ultimate motive, okay? And all these motives or these choices, these things, they all plug into that ultimate motive. You know, I can't be going north to Mineola and also be going south to Tyler. I can change directions anytime, but I can't go both ways at the same time.
I noticed in that scripture you read about Noah and the flood, it said that every intention of their hearts was evil. That doesn't mean they didn't do nice things sometimes.
Right.
But as everybody had the supreme intention of doing evil.
That's right.
They're all living for evil.
That's right.
Yeah.
And every person and all of you in this room, we're all ultimately living, really, intending to secure some kind of good. But only you know what that is for you. So, do you guys have any questions? I feel like I should probably wrap. I don't know if they're going to come bang on the door. I guess I should open the door and we'll see. It's the first time we've done a revival theology conference with breakouts. So I'm learning. But do you guys have any questions?
Revival theology conferences without breakouts?
No, I'm just being funny again. Do you guys have any questions? Okay, I skipped a lot of stuff. If anybody wants my notes, I'd be happy to send them to you. It's about 7 pages of stuff. So when I write down my email, that would be the best way. Email me after this weekend and I will respond to you.